Do to him.
How would you do it?
No, hey, don't think he doesn't give it back either. But I want y'all to interrupt him while he's going along and ask questions. And he's got show and tell. He did bring show and tell. And I'm glad we cranked him out at night, and I appreciate the fact that you're here, dear.
Well, I'm here because I owed Libby a favor.
This little arm twisted never hurt anybody.
I didn't come to make a speech. I came just to talk to you and to tell you a little bit about our family business. Libby tried to get me to talk about GCMA. That would take research, and I'd have to put it together. But I did have a little knowledge of that at one time. But John K. Milner came to Gulfport in 1904. He was a realtor from Alabama, and they came here from Columbiana, Alabama, and Anniston. The Coca Bottling Company was actually started in 1906. It was started as a result of Mr. Jones had an interest in it. He wanted a plant here, and so a fellow by the name of Tatum, his name was T.D. Tatum. He started the company in 1906. Now, a short time after that, in 1908, the company became a partnership between Walter Bellingrath of Mobile and J.K. Milner Sr. And they named the company Coca-Cola Bottling Company. And Libby, for your information, according to this records of the Coca-Cola Company, the plant managers from that time until now were members of the Milner family. From 1908 to 1916, the original partner, J.K. Milner Sr., was the manager. J.W. Milner, the mayor of Gulfport for 16 years, which I think the number's wrong there, but managed it from 1916 to 1950. E.C. Milner from 1950 to 1956. J.K. Milner from 1956 to present. This was in 1957, so I was the last Milner, third generation to run the plant. The first truck in Gulfport was purchased in 1910. It was not only the first one in Gulfport, but it was the first one on the coast. And it was a van. It was purchased from the Van Winkle Gin and Machine Company in Alabama. And according to the records I have, it would haul about 1,400 pound capacity, and it was equipped to deliver Coca-Cola. And J.K. Milner Sr. stated at the bottling plant that deliveries could be made on roads over which were impassable for a mule dray. So I brought some pictures. This is a picture of the original plant. The original plant was located on 24th Avenue over here, across the railroad tracks, where now I believe it's Conway Martin. It's the old waterworks building. That's where the original plant was. That plant was, after that, it's located on 29th Avenue, and I'm going to show you pictures of that, but I want to get back to the Van Winkle truck. I have pictures of the Van Winkle truck. This is the original truck. This is J.K., Bessie, and Mary. There were John Kennedy's wife was Rachel Hill Milner. She was also from Alabama. She was born in 1862. He was born in 1860. They had 8 kids. The kids were Wilson Milner. Many of you remember Tom Milner at the Hancock Bank. Well, that was Wilson Milner's son.
Tell them what they did. Wilson ran GCMA.
Well, Wilson was a banker. I was going to get to that, but Wilson was a banker. And the bank went broke. It was upstate in a little town. I forgot the town, but it went broke, and he came down here, and Joe gave him a job at GCMA, and he was a business manager at GCMA until GCMA closed. He lived out there in what is now the second house on this side of the old what used to be the junior school, and that house is being redone. It's quite a nice house.
Belongs to the Douglases.
Does it? Okay. The second in line was Bessie. She was a school teacher. She was Harry's principal and mine.
The belt, did you, Harry?
She spanked my hands with Coca-Cola rulers.
That was legal, wasn't it?
He's right. She spanked me worse than that. But anyway, she was a principal of Gulfport Schools and was a teacher for many, many years. And there's an interesting story about her. She was in Gulfport. She was principal of Central Elementary School, located where the courthouse is now. They had a fire. It was a 3-story building. And as the building was burning, the kids got trapped on the 2nd and 3rd floors and couldn't get out. And she got the janitor to put a ladder on his shoulder to where they could get the kids down from a window. And they got all the kids out safely without harm. There was a plaque in the old junior high school, Harry, that was located there, and it had her name and told the story of that fire. I understand that plaque is now at the Central Superintendent's office. It was found after Katrina in a dump, and was a trash pile, and was brought to the school, and they talked to me about it, and I told them what it was. But after Bessie came Joe. Joe was born in 1892 and died in 1950. Joe was the mayor of Gulfport, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. After Joe was Mary Body. She was Nathan Body's mother. Jake Milner came, and he was really John K. Milner Jr. He didn't know Junior should have been on his name until I told him one time. And he couldn't believe it. He said, it doesn't belong here. Yeah, it does. And now it's on his grave mark, by the way. Rachel Wills came next. She was married to a lawyer, and they lived in Meridian. Libby's father, Robert Milner, born in 1902, was one of them. And then my father, Clifton Milner, was born in 1907. And by the way, since y'all are historical folks, he was the only one born in Milner that was born in Grass Lawn. Now, Grass Lawn was never owned by Joe Milner. You know, some historians have written that it was, but it wasn't. It was held in the estate of Rachel E. Milner after she died in 1946 until Bessie died, and the estate was closed, and we sold the house into the Spanish Trail Foundation. And so that's the lineage of the second generation Milners. And in they had the soft drink business wasn't glamorous. It was a business that went by the economy here was up and down. It was great when timber was here. Then when timber pulled out, they were all destitute. And this has been if ever there was a boom bust town, Gulfport has been a boom bust town. If you really studied the numbers, the economics of this area throughout its history. In 1916, J.K. Milner died. Well, Mr. Bellingrath, being the partner that he was, he ran a business over in Mobile, and he had a fire, a major fire. And I don't remember exactly which year, I've got it somewhere, but it was along about 1915. And he wanted to sell his interest in the Coca-Cola plant. And he wanted around $3,000. Well, they didn't have $3,000 to pay. And my grandma, he started really putting the pressure on in that 1916 era. And my grandmother took over running the plant. She's not listed as a formal manager, but she ran the plant. And she borrowed the money to buy that Bottling.Gulfport's interest from her half-brother. Her half-brother lived in Birmingham, and his last name was Parker. He was the brother to Dr. E.C. Parker, who was a prominent doctor in Gulfport for years. Joe was a student at Washington and Lee, and he graduated with a law degree. Came to Gulfport and opened a law practice, not intending to go into the Coca-Cola business. But my grandmother needed some help, and he was consented to doing some of it, although he kind of did it in the background until about 1921. In 21, the company was incorporated, and that's when he took over as president and did all those things. But it was formally incorporated in 21. Well, the Coca-Cola business in 1921 was in a state of confusion because Candler had just bought the company out in, I guess, about 1918, and then after that, Mr. Woodruff, which was not Bob Woodruff, by the way, but it was his father, took over the company. And the Coca-Cola company's interest was totally different from the bottler's interest. The Coca-Cola's interest, and it was they wanted to sell gallons. That's what they were only interested in, gallons. The bottler's interest was in units, cases. And there's a big difference there when you come to collecting the money. The Coca-Cola company really wasn't interested in the bottlers much because they were interested in the fountain business. And many of you have heard Mr. Beatonhorn in Vicksburg, Mississippi was the first in the world to bottle Coca-Cola. Coca-Colas were a thorn in the Coca-Cola company. The bottlers were a thorn in the side of most of the Coca-Cola company. Coca-Cola company tried to raise the price, but Coca-Cola bottlers had a strong bottlers association, and there were suits going back and forth. And at that time, they developed a contract that we call the old line contract, and the contract set up formal boundaries that you allowed to operate in. Prior to that, they were pretty much informal, but most of the boundaries, if you went back and looked at the boundaries of plants, it was, they put a compass where the train station was, drew a circle around it, and that was pretty much the territory because that's the way most towns were built, around the railroad station. Well, Gulfport was no circle. I mean, you had the water out there, and it's pretty much a T. And so our boundaries were set, though, in 1921, and there was some wrangling about that. Mr. Bottling.Gulfport and my dad worked out the final eastern boundary in the office here in Gulfport. And I've seen all those surveys and all that stuff. But back to this contract. This contract had granted a permanent franchise as long as you, number one, followed the specs of the Coca-Cola company, and you had to at that time produce the product, and they got into it over the price of syrup. Well, the Coca-Cola Company was forced to grant a fixed price for Coca-Cola syrup, with one exception, with two exceptions. One was in that there was a clause for advertising, and they collected a nickel off of every gallon that you bought for advertising. And they also had another clause in there for sugar. Sugar was one of the main ingredients, and they would buy the sugar. So they made the syrup. We didn't make it. They made it, and it was shipped in here in barrels. It first came in kegs, and then wooden kegs, and then later in stainless steel drums. But anyway, in going back to that 1921 when Joe took it over, Joe, the company still had problems. The plant was located, as I moved to 24th, just north of the railroad, where OK Transfer was located for a time. That was the second Coca-Cola location. They had a fire. Then they operated out of the garage across the street that the Markham Hotel had for just a short period of time till they could get their feet on the floor and get back open over on 29. They operated out of that building on 29th until 1936, 1937, and then they moved into what was known then as the Arcade Building, and we stayed there until 1964. These are pictures of the buildings here where the plant was located, and you can pass it around. The truck, by the way, down here, I'm not familiar with. It's the only thing on this picture I didn't give them, but I'm not familiar with it. That was a poster put together for the 100th anniversary in 2006. The company struggled. A lot of people talk about those rich milliners, and all that. I've heard that all my life, but it wasn't that way. And I can prove to you some of it, and I'm going to show you some things that y'all probably have never seen. First of all, this was my original paycheck. Not the first one, but it was one of the early ones. These are checks on, what do you say, John?
You're going to show us the first dollar you ever made, too.
I don't believe I can do that.
You still got it.
I was in the Coke business, man. These are checks that were written in Gulfport in 1932 by the Coca-Cola Bottling Company, signed by J.W. Miller. Canceled checks. And on some of these checks, they were part of the First National Bank of Gulfport. As y'all know, the First National Bank of Gulfport was run by J.J. Harry. The bank went broke. I believe Joe was on the board of directors of it. They lost everything they had. And they immediately opened an account with a Hancock County bank in Long Beach. Hancock Bank then had a branch in Long Beach, but not in Gulfport. I have the original checks, some of them, and they scratched out the name of First National Bank and wrote in there Hancock County. You can pass these around and take a look at them. We recovered those. We recovered those checks. I kind of got them by mistake. There was a they were tearing down the arcade building. And we had leased the arcade building several times, and then we sold it to Bubba Osterlet, and the building was torn down some years after that. Well, we didn't know that there was, or I didn't, that there was a void in the ceiling in the office area. We knew about the second floor, but we didn't know about this void between the office ceiling and the roof. And apparently when they were tearing it down, they found boxes of these canceled checks, and a guy called me and told me, and I said, oh, I'll just haul them off. Well, they started blowing out of the truck around town. So I started getting phone calls. And I told Doug, I said, Doug Price, who was worried about it, I told Doug, I said, Doug, go down and check on these things. Well, Doug brings back this stack of checks, and he tells me and he lays them out there. I said, well, Doug, we'll split it. So he took half of the stack, and I got the other half. But that's how we got those checks, and I doubt any of you have ever seen those before.
Tip, was the arcade building, that's on 775?
775.
775?
That's price.
It was located on 13th Street.
Yeah, what
And
Bob
29.
Austin
Hey,
was.
Charles.
Not where Bob Osterloh
The
was.
second one.
It was located at the corner of 29th and 13th.
Big bucks.
On the north side. I have a couple of the tickets. Oh, we bottled not only Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola in those days was only sold in a 6.5 ounce bottle, or before that even a 6 ounce bottle. And the company, though, during the 20s and 30s, bottled flavors. We call it soda water. I have a bottle here. The gentleman back there has a bottle very similar to this. This is a Magnolia bottle. And this bottle is a 1923 bottle, I believe. And it has Gulfport, Mississippi written on the bottom. Now, the bottle is on their own glass. They bought the glass, and they owned the glass, and they loaned it to the customers. However, they charged a deposit, put a deposit on it so that to encourage you to bring it back. And that system stayed in effect from then until, from beginning till just a few years ago.
You'll never see another bottle like that square.
Well, that's true. It's very hard to handle, by the way, with machinery. This bottle would eat some machinery up. It really would. However, this particular brand was a private label between Gulfport and New Orleans. Mobile. So Mobile had the same thing at one time. But they sold orange, grape, and root beer out of these bottles for years. The early bottles, this is one of the earliest, what we call soda water bottles that we had. This bottle goes back to
Nice color.
probably the I would say this is probably about 1907-8 bottle. Have one here. There was a Coca-Cola bottle, Gulfport, Mississippi, and it was of the same vintage. In 1915, they designed the first hobble skirt bottles, which this is called, and it was developed, but it's a little different. This particular bottle is a whole lot different. This one is Gulfport, Mississippi, and it's called a Christmas bottle. It has the registry on it. It was made by mistake. There was a whole bunch of them made throughout the country by mistake. And this one right here was made December 23rd, 1923. It's got the date here. It was not supposed to be printed there. It was supposed to be a mold mark down here carrying the date of the bottle. But this is called the Christmas bottle, and the Coca-Cola Company really treasures this particular bottle. It was by mistake. They registered the design or something about that time because, see, this bottle changed design. The shape of the original hobble skirt bottle was fat in the middle and would break easily. And besides that, it would wear out quick. So it was hard to bottle and run down conveyor and what have you because they were mechanizing things at that time. So they made this bottle straighter and it ran off the heel of the bottle down the machine.
There are some young people in here, they might not know that we used to recycle those Go bottles.
Well, you know, when
2 cents. Oh, is it 2 cents?
Yeah, what do we get for that? 2 cents? 2 cents on
Well,
a
you-
return on a bottle?
well, but it went up to 4.
6?
It went up to 4.
Right, right.
It went up to 4, and then it went to, and we got 12 cents for the case. We sold Coca-Cola here in Gulfport for 80 cents a case until 1957. I sold many a case for 80 cents a case, and we had a 40-cent deposit on it. You can't get rich off of 80 cents a case. And I'm going to tell you that. John accuses me of being tight. You heard him say it. It is true. You had to squeeze the buffalo till he squealed. You literally had to if you were going to make any money and make a living out of this stuff. I have a bottle here that I don't think there's another one in existence. And I learned something about our business with this bottle. It's just half full now. I was surprised when I took it off my shelf. It's got a little crack in it, and apparently it's been leaking. This bottle is Bay St. Louis, Mississippi.
Really?
Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. Now, our franchise was only in Harrison County. Later, Stone County was added. And the territory in Hancock County was owned by the Freeman family in New Orleans. However, the Freemans couldn't service the area. So we kind of bootlegged stuff over there. In order for us to service it, it either went by horse and buggy around through the kill and down because you couldn't get across the bay. In 1921, I believe, they started the steam ferry across, and we were able to put some in there. We, however, did ship some by train over there occasionally, but that was a high-cost proposition. So we managed to buy and kind of horse trade a little bit with the Freemans, and we got Hancock County. They just couldn't service it because of the Wrigley's and all that swamp area. And at 80 cents a case, you could make money. You had to be careful. And that's how I learned how we got Bay St. Louis, and the fact that we put a sub-plant there. Sub-franchises was not uncommon in this business, and really what you did is you just allowed somebody to produce it, and they produced it more or less for you, paid you commission, and that's the way you collect money. But it only lasted a couple of years, because then right after that, after the ferry, in 1926, I believe it was, they built the wooden bridge across, and we were able then to run trucks straight across over there. So Joe then was running the company. World War II came along. They were broke. World War II comes along, and Joe brings my dad into the business. My dad graduated from Vanderbilt in 1928, and he opened a business in Gulfport, a line oil company distributorship. And he worked, shall we say, part-time as a bookkeeper for the Coca-Cola plant during the 30s, and then during the World War II, it became too much for Joe, and he functioned there more or less as a sales manager. Joe still carried the titles, but my dad ran the business. And my dad, Joe died. Joe had a stroke on a train coming from the, at that time it was called the American Bottlers Bottlers of Carbonated Beverages Association, ABCB. And Joe had been, this is interesting, Joe, as some of you know, was very well placed. Joe Milner knew lots of folks. He could call anybody in Washington, D.C. just about it and make connections. He and Senator Pat Harrison, whom I hope y'all study, were just like this. They were good buddies. Senator Pat Harrison, of course, was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Well, Joe, during the war, worked with Senator Pat and some others, and they were able to get large amounts of sugar for the soft drink industry. But we quit bottling the soda waters and flavors and put all of our sugar into Coca-Cola. And we're able to grow the business and supply the bases on that during that. But Joe became president of the American Bottlers Association. And so he was quite influential from a little bitty plant in Gulfport, Mississippi, throughout the United States. And Joe just didn't have time to run the business, so my dad ran it. In 1964, we built the plant up on 49. We never got any government money. We didn't get any government tax breaks or anything, things like that. We financed the thing. We expanded that plant in 1969. We had some great growth in the early 70s, and I can tell you, the 70s was terrible for the soft drink industry as a whole. The reason is in about 73 or 4, the price of sugar went from 7 cents a pound to 77 cents a pound in just a few months. Well, it threw many plants that weren't well financed and well run. It put them out of business. The soft drink industry, the Coca-Cola company, required that we pay them cash on delivery. When they delivered syrup to us, we paid them cash. And of course we couldn't get our money until a little later. The 7-Up company, and I bring this up because of Sam Allman, the 7-Up company required payment of cash before they would ship concentrate to you. And you pay them, 2 weeks later you got your concentrate, and you could make your syrups then and sell your product. And then when you sold it to grocery stores like your chain stores, you had to wait 60 days to get your money. So that really threw the soft drink industry into really a rough time. We were fortunate enough, however, that we were able to buy out Sam Allman. Now, I worked most of that deal, and I learned then that you don't buy the franchise. The franchises in the soft drink business are not for sale. You can't sell it from one to the other. You can sell your business, but you can't sell the franchise. And so you go to the company and you negotiate with them for that franchise, and you get it for nothing. But they make a whole long list of things that you have to do sales-wise, and they have timetables for that. And so I had the pleasure of I went to Dallas, and I negotiated the franchise with the president of the Dr. Pepper Company. I wanted that franchise. To me, that was where growth was going to be. And so I prevailed, and the president, we got to know each other pretty well, and we got, his name was Foots Clements. And Foots was he was an interesting fellow. But we got that franchise. And we were negotiating with the 7-Up company. I didn't particularly want that franchise because we had Sprite. And we've done pretty good with Sprite. But I had to take it because we had to buy it, and of course Sam was in trouble at that time. And I called him up, and we were going up to see him, Dave Cottrell, myself. And they told me, he said, don't bring that fella Allman up here. I said, well, he's coming. He said, well, we don't want to see him. And so we go to, Sam goes with us to St. Louis. We get to St. Louis, and the next day we go to the headquarters of the 7-Up company to negotiate this franchise, and we get to the front door of the place, and they had a guard standing there, and we had to show our credentials, and they said, all right, you can come. They told me I could come, told Dave Cottrell he could come, but you can't come. You can't even come in the building. They wouldn't let Sam in the building. Well, I told him, I said, well, no, we can't do that. We have to let him in the building at least. And Sam sat there until noon. We broke for lunch. And we went back up, started negotiating again. I finally told him, I said, look, we can't make a deal. We're going home. If you want us to sell your product, call me. Dave looked at me, he says, you really going to do that? I said, yeah, let's go, Dave. And so we left and came home, and about 2 weeks later they called me and we got that franchise.
Hope you got Sam a sandwich.
Well, we all ate the same. Yeah. I know time is running short and I've run long. I could talk about this stuff for days. But anyway, it was a fun business, and the Barks business we bought that's another story, and I negotiated that one and bought it. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I negotiated the sale of the company, and I think the shareholders did pretty well. We had 22 shareholders at the time. I did not own the company. I owned more of the surviving company today than I owned of Coca-Cola Bottling Company, if you want to know the truth. I still have my interest in it with Coca-Cola United. We're actually about half of what I used to have. But I do still have that, and so we're well entrenched in all of this. If y'all got any questions, I could rattle all day about this.
I got a silly question. Why wouldn't they let Sam in? Is that a long story? that
You know
you'd rather
Sam?
not tell?
You know Sam? I'll just,
Senior or junior?
Obviously
junior,
not. Huh?
junior.
Oh, junior.
Sam was a little demanding on some of them and would do what they wanted.
I got you.
There was also another thing during this time when we negotiated and bought Sam's business. I was particularly interested in protecting our franchise because that's where our value of our business was. And there was a great thing going on in this country where the Freemans tried to come in and into other people's territories without honoring the franchise boundaries, and they did. And that's a long story. We went to the Coca-Cola Bottlers Association. Coca-Cola Bottlers Association sued everybody in the world, and we stayed in court for over 10 years. And Thad Cochran wrote the law which grants exclusive franchises in the soft drink industry. We got that passed. I spent a lot of time in Washington. I've been in all of our legislatures a whole lot, and we got that passed. But during that time, I was interested in protecting our franchise where we could go anywhere and sell it if we had to. And so that's why we were interested in the 7-Up too. And I thought that we needed to do that.
What's that?
Y'all got any questions?
I tell you what, well, I'm gonna keep my promise that we're staying as close to 7 o'clock as we can.
I'm through.
So if anybody has any questions, I'm sure you'd be glad to talk to them. We have a show and tell. I want to get to show us the show and tell real quick. But Tim, while he's getting that out, I want to present you with one of our Mississippi